L'approccio basato sui diritti umani, come sta cambiando il nostro modo di vedere la disabilità?
So the human rights-based approach to disability, which is enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, actually represents a paradigm shift of how we think about people with disabilities. First and foremost, it says that they have the same rights as everyone else. They are subjects of their rights. And it ensures that in this case, there can be no exceptions. There's no higher standards, there's no double standards. They are equal members of society. And I think what's very important that the human rights-based approach brings is that it accepts difference, it embraces diversity as part of humanity. So persons with disabilities belong just like everybody else. And that, of course, we need to make sure that they can participate and be included on an equal basis with others. So the Convention brings these measures such as reasonable accommodation, universal design, accessibility, the provision of support, so that they can exercise their rights just like everyone else.
Riguardo le persone con disabilità, quali sono i maggiori ostacoli per un approccio al problema della disabilità basato sui diritti umani?
I think the biggest obstacles to the implementation of the Convention and to upholding the human rights-based approach to disability is that we still, in our society, in our laws, in our culture, in our values, we still hold on to these old approaches, thinking about persons with disabilities, that they need to be treated, they need to be cured, they need to be protected and cared for through benevolence or through charity. So I think that kind of that those views are still very prevalent, and it will take a lot of efforts in order to change these views, change the views of society, the change views of families of persons with disabilities, and also the views of persons with disabilities themselves, that they can recognize themselves as equal as others and subjects of their own rights. It's also about how do we get rid and purge our laws and our policies and practices of this discrimination, which has been there for centuries. So it's about how do we ensure that they have the right to vote on an equal basis with others. And that doesn't mean only making sure that everything is accessible, but making sure that in the Constitution, in our electoral laws, there are no restrictions for their right to vote. So there are a lot of provisions in the law and the civil code and criminal codes which are based on these old models, which we really need to address and confront and repeal, so that the human rights-based approach to persons with disabilities can participate in our society.
Come donna, come vede una discriminazione basata sul genere nei confronti delle persone con disabilità?
Yes, I think the gender dimension when it comes to disability-based discrimination is something very strong, something that we all need to recognize and to address. The fact that women and girls with disabilities are disproportionately impacted and disadvantaged in our society is something that we need to pay attention to and to fight against. For example, we know that women and girls with disabilities are more excluded when we talk about going to school, accessing higher education, going to work, also with respect to accessing sexual reproductive health and rights. There's a lot of stereotypes about what kind of, whether firstly they can make their own decisions when it comes to their health, also whether they even need sexuality education or access to sexual reproductive health services. We know that they are, amongst women generally, there's a higher proportion of them who are victims of violence, and generally it's harder for them to report this violence, to get information, to receive information about victim support services, also to make complaints. Police often don't take them as credible. They don't think that they can, they don't trust their version of events. Sometimes they're even questioned about whether they know what entails the truth, whether they can tell the truth in a trial. So there are layers and layers of discrimination against women and girls with disabilities. And I think what the CRPD brings, which is very valuable, is a recognition of multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, that we are all made up of multiple identities, and that these need to be respected. Our lived experiences need to be respected. And that means, of course, that if you're facing discrimination as a woman, as a person with a disability, as an older person or a migrant, all of this it counts and needs to be taken into consideration when enjoying and exercising